Hello and welcome to this special interview with retiring U.S. Ambassador to Liberia, Mark Tonon. Welcome to this interview, Ambassador Tonon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, it's the first interview we're having since news broke of your early retirement. 1 year into what's supposed to be a 2 year post. Why have you made this decision?
It's a personal decision. First of all, I just want to say it's been really such an honor to have been chosen and also to have served as the U.S. ambassador here to Liberia. Obviously, many people know I have close ties to Liberia, having served here as a Peace Corps volunteer a long time ago, some 36, 37 years ago, which is hard for even me to believe. So to have come back here, to been able to return here at the end of my career has really been just such a wonderful opportunity. So I'm very grateful for that. Um, you know, I, like members of the military, diplomats also spend large parts of their career away from family, and I made a personal choice that I had to return to be with my family, and I don't regret that at all. But when I told the president here, President Boakai, and foreign minister as well, they were both extremely gracious in accepting my decision. And it's not an early retirement. I'm in, I guess from this post, but I've been in the Foreign Service for some 32 years, so it's time.
It's shocking to many people given that you haven't even gone for 1 year. Next month makes exactly 1 year.
Exactly.
So many people are surprised and shocked about this.
I wouldn't think too much about it. Like I said, it's been a great pleasure to have been here for the past year. And I think we've accomplished a lot. It's been, we can get into this in greater detail in some of your other questions, but, you know, we've made a major pivot in our relationship with Liberia from aid to trade. We just had the president of Liberia in the White House yesterday. These are significant milestones, and so I feel a real sense of achievement.
We will get to that maybe
Yeah.
later on in this interview.
Please.
But you were appointed to this post,
Mhm.
then President Joe Biden, and was it a difficult decision to serve? Was it difficult to serve on current President Trump?
Not at all. You'll find that with most public servants, we accept the fact that we are public servants. We are apolitical. We serve the administration that is in power. So we adjust accordingly. We're all professionals. And so, we've worked hard since January 20th to implement the new administration's policies.
And no pressure whatsoever.
No pressure. How so?
No pressure that triggered this decision to resign.
No, not at all. No, this is a purely personal decision. If I can make that very clear, it has nothing to do with any political choice. I am proud to serve any administration.
Now, there's a story in the Wall Street Journal today that President Boakai, along with the other four African presidents who met President Trump yesterday, where each sent requests prior to that meeting to take tier country nationals to help meet with President Trump's campaign promise to deport millions of undocumented migrants from the U.S. Um, just to be clear, these people have nothing to do with Liberia. Some of them are convicted criminals. Can you confirm that, and how do you feel?
Um, I can't confirm that this was actually a topic raised in their meetings yesterday. I know I've also seen reports in the Wall Street Journal. What I can say more broadly is this administration is very serious about illegal immigration, and they're looking at all kinds of methods and working with all kinds of partners in ways to combat that. That is a sovereign nation's right, and it's also any nation like Liberia's right to either agree or not to agree for example, take deportees or others back into their soil. So far, Liberia has been a very strong partner, as they often are. But I can't speak to the specifics of that. I just don't know that that was brought up in the actual meeting.
But how do you feel?
How do I feel about combating illegal immigration?
How do you feel about the administration's decision to ask countries to take country nationals?
I feel again how I feel personally about it is not important. How this administration feels about illegal immigration is important, and it's a priority. And we can get into some of that later when we talk about some of the problems that Liberia faces on that front.
Now, one might think that the whole point of that meeting was to ask the countries to take migrants.
The whole, you mean the
The
meeting
point
of the
of the
meeting of the
meeting,
meeting at the White
summit,
House
yes?
yesterday, the summit? Absolutely not. Look, that meeting. Don't underestimate this. Don't try to see kind of false narratives out of this meeting. The White House reached out to 5 African leaders, and the fact that Liberia was included on that list speaks, I think, significantly to Liberia's position, both regionally but also globally. Let's not forget, Liberia won a non-permanent member status of the UN Security Council. So Liberia is one of the strongest and most stable democracies in the region. So let's not try to understate Liberia's importance. And I think President Boakai was very eloquent in his remarks with the president yesterday, and I think this speaks to Liberia's rising stature, both as a strategic country where it sits within West Africa, as a regional voice. Let's not forget that Liberia is one of the strongest democracies. As I said, I've often said this. Liberia since 2003 has had 3 peaceful, credible elections, 2 peaceful transfers of power, and has 2 ex-presidents, former presidents who live here. That's a statement for an African country to have made, and for any, frankly, democracy to have. So Liberia is an important country, and I think there was a recognition of that. It's also a recognition that we want to be closer trading partners with Liberia, and we want to seek more investment in Liberia as well as other countries but that's another clear priority. This administration sees Africa as an important region. And I think this meeting was largely a recognition of that. The fact that they were able to meet one-on-one with the president and then jointly at the luncheon. And then later on, there were meetings at the State Department and I believe at the Pentagon as well. But this is an important signal, I think, from this administration to Africa that we want to pursue closer relations. And we see Africa as a strategic partner.
Yes, and let's talk more about that because President Trump did emphasize on that during the press stakeout, and he did say that America is looking forward to move in a direction of trade to aid. Why is that important now? Because this does look like a shift in a previous policy by the U.S.
Sure. It's a big question. I'll try to answer it, and if I don't quite get it, you can add on. So you're right. There has been a pivotal change from aid to trade. I mean, that's the bumper sticker. It rhymes, right? But from assistance to a more investment-driven, commercial-driven diplomacy. There's a lot of reasons. First, I'll start by saying, no one respects the work and the legacy that the transformative effect that U.S. Agency for International Development has had here in Liberia, especially since 2003. But I also can speak from personal experience. I worked for a USAID health program when I was a volunteer here. I saw firsthand that we saved lives, that we work with clinics in Grambassa, giving vaccinations in villages. So I saw personally the effect that assistance has had. That said, if I'm frank, and I will be frank, that assistance creates a certain kind of dependency. And I think that what we're seeing here is a pivot away from assistance to a more strategic partnership, whereas we are seeking to invest in Liberia and also increase our trade with Liberia so that Liberia becomes a stronger, rather, economic partner. As I just mentioned, on the democracy and governance side of things, Liberia is a very attractive place for investors. They need to do a better job creating the kind of business climate that also attracts. That means countering corruption, which they're working hard to do, but also working harder to present Liberia and all that it offers for would-be investors. But just to finish my point here, while Liberia has come so far on the political front, if I could put it that way, the governance front, the democracy front, it's frankly lagged behind on the economic development front. And so what we really want to see, we, the United States, and myself personally, want to see here is that an economic side grow. I want to see the Liberian economy grow to its fullest potential. It has the resources, it has the people power. I mean, it is an attractive market, but it just needs to get those investors and that investment here. And the longer term effect is that you will create jobs, opportunities that will spring from that, whether it's small businesses, whether it's young people deciding to stay here and make their lives here versus trying to go to the United States and elsewhere to live, sometimes illegally. So that's a way you address a lot of these other problems by creating a future for Liberians here. And I believe that that can be done to a large extent through this pivot to trade away from assistance and aid.
It does seem that
Sorry, it was a
that
lot.
decision took many by surprise. We've had Liberians who have lost their jobs. The Liberian government has said that the expected loss of that is around 300 million US dollars. So everybody got shocked. Now people are out of jobs. How is that decision better off now? How was that a better decision comparing the fact that um, many are out of jobs and the economy is being badly hit by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. Any transition away from one model to another model is going to leave some people, frankly, out of jobs, as you said. I mean, we've had a very difficult time here at the embassy. We've had to let go some very good people, both Americans and Liberian staff. That's never easy. I never take that lightly as a leader of this embassy, and I don't think anyone who works here does. We recognize the incredible work that they did. Again, both Americans and Liberians, and respect that. Of course, we also, working within Liberian labor laws, made sure that they were given severance pay for their work as well, and recognize that. But moving away from that, this is about what countries do when they're going through major transitions. I would say that we're on a footing now that is much more. One thing I just want to also add, forgive me, returning briefly to the other thing, is the other thing we've tried to do is work very transparently with the Ministry of Finance and with the other affected ministries, with Minister Gafwan especially, as he has actually tried to have to make up the shortfall in the budget. We're well aware of that. And I just can say we've been as transparent and as helpful as possible in helping him work through all those machinations. But moving away to this new model it's much more, we feel, supportive of President Bolakai's agenda, the arrest agenda. But from my own experience as a diplomat, I've worked in other countries, Senegal, Poland. After the wall came down in the 90s, I was there as a diplomat. I saw that country go through a similar transformation away from a largely socialist economy that wasn't suited for today's world. And they transformed themselves in a matter of, frankly, 5 to 10 years into a modern, Western-oriented economy, a free market economy. Was it easy? No, it was not. Was it ultimately worth it? Absolutely. Poland now you'd think you're in Western Europe. It is a fully prosperous, functioning economy now. And Poles who, like Liberians back in the day, would often seek their future by illegally immigrating to the United States, no longer do that because they have opportunity right there at home. That is my deepest hope for Liberia, that young Liberians graduating from university, graduating from Cuttington, graduating from other Booker Washington, graduating from the University of Liberia, graduating from high school, vocational schools, have opportunity to make their lives here. And I believe the only way you can do that is by growing the economy.
Now, what would you say to young mothers who whose future depended on a program that was funded largely by the U.S. government for maternal mortality, for example?
Yep.
Now, as a result of that cut in aid, the program is cut short, they are all stranded, services are limited for them. There are concerns that babies could die, uh, more mothers could have issues of childbirth, issues with childbirth. What would you say to these kinds of people?
Um, Again, these are very difficult decisions and these are very difficult transitions. I can assure you that our folks who in USAID have worked very closely with the Ministry of Health to try to transition, to try to find ways to help them with the financial shortfalls. But part of assistance, as I mentioned previously, is about growing capacity. We will have some basic health assistance that will remain. Our PEPFAR program, our malaria program will remain in place, as well as our central medical store, at least through the foreseeable future, I think until late next year. And that also delivers life-saving drugs to clinics upcountry. So what does remain is mostly humanitarian focused. But what we have tried to do is to work closely with the Ministry of Health to find the capacity, to find the efficiencies where they can rather find the efficiencies to fund these programs. But recognizing that absolutely these are difficult times and transitions.
So let's talk more now about the 3-8 policy
Yeah.
of the government. And President Bouaka did correctly say that Liberia does have a lot of mineral resources and was opening Liberia for the US to come into and then a survey, because a survey was previously done by the Chinese government.
Yeah.
Why is it important for Liberia to open up to the US, to have more US companies coming to Liberia?
Well, it's important that Liberia open up to investment, international investment, foreign trade, however you want to put it. I'm here because I'm the U.S. ambassador. I'm going to say we want U.S. investment here. Part of my job, and if I could just refer, I've seen. We can talk a little bit later about the Ivanhoe agreement that was.
Yes, that's the next
that was
question
reached.
after this one.
Sorry, but there was. I'm not unaware that there was some references in the press of in the media coverage of it about the role that the United States embassy had played. That betrayed a certain lack of what we do as an embassy through commercial diplomacy, and this is true for any embassy anywhere in the world. A large, I would say, significant component, and this predates even the Trump administration, which has put an extra priority on trade promotion and investment. But well before that administration, there's always been something we call commercial diplomacy. And that is, if a company has U.S. commercial advocacy rights or is a U.S.-owned company, then we're going to advocate for that company's company, whether it's a trade deal, whether it's an investment opportunity. That's our role as diplomats to look after them. And that includes also existing investments here, such as Firestone. And frankly, every embassy does that, whether it's the German, the Chinese, whoever.
So what role did you play in ensuring that this Ivanhoe deal did go through?
Well, we made sure that Ivanhoe was getting fair treatment. But again, we do this on behalf of any company. Frankly, AML has also U.S. commercial advocacy rights. Part of me is staying in touch with the leadership, as I did with Ivanhoe, and I do the same with AML. I was up in March or April and visited and saw their concentrator, saw the significant investment they've made in Nimba. This is not a win-lose proposition. It is a win-win proposition. What do I mean by that? 2, 3, 4 companies can all play in the same field, if I could put it, economic field, and everyone can walk away winners. There's a lot of mineral deposits. They also don't observe strictly borders. Some of those mineral deposits are in Guinea. Some of them are in Ivory Coast. Some of them are right here in Liberia. What is important, and goes back to this, the importance of this deal, is that there is one north-south railway line that is extremely important. And we have long held, as has President Boakai and his administration, that railway line must revert to become a national asset for Liberia. We are in agreement with that. That is not to, AML has had that under their concession ownership or operatorship of that railway line. And respectfully, this President Boakai, has made it a priority to move that railway into a multi-user railway under a national railway authority governed by an independent operator. What does that do? This is not to in any way knock what AML has done here. Far from it. They are a serious investor. They are here for the long haul. They're doing tremendous work up in Nimba, both within the community and in their investment there. But that railway line in a country that we all know is lacking serious basic infrastructure is a vital link. That is why Ivanhoe, when they looked at the terrain, they're mining their iron ore out of Guinea, but they saw the opportunity to bring that right down and bring it out of the port of Buchanan. And as the owner of Ivanhoe said, Robert Friedland, you make a right-hand turn and you're right to the Gulf of America, or you're to other European markets or markets in the Middle East. That's a part that speaks to, again, Liberia's strategic position, but it also speaks to the importance of that railway line and how important it is for the Liberian government to own it, to operate it under an independent operator who can make sure that everyone has free and fair access to it, and then to improve that.
The criticism we've heard for AML is that they've done a lot of investments.
They have.
And now this will break out of that.
It won't. AML has made a lot of major investments in that railway and to move their product to port. Absolutely. Kudos to them. But it's not their railway line, simply put. It is under the current concession, but this President Boakai, and the U.S. agrees with his move towards a multi-user national railway authority under an independent operatorship. That is in Liberia's best strategic interests.
Ivanhoe hasn't started through its subsidiary in Guinea to start to ship iron ore here. The rail has not been completed. There are still ongoing discussions about getting those iron ores to Liberia. Why the rush?
No rush here. That's another thing that made me laugh in some of the media coverage. This negotiation predates me by about 6 years. It's been a long conversation to get to this point. I think 7 years in the making. That's probably a little too long, but anyway, we got there. As for what I would obviously defer to Ivanhoe to speak to how they're going to run their operations. But I believe they're going to, once they begin mining iron ore, they're going to truck it over to the railway line. So, and that's all being worked out. That's not our business, but that's what Ivanhoe is doing, I think.
But what are the benefits for Liberia in simple terms?
It's Liberia. I think we put the investment, or not we, forgive me. Ivanhoe puts the investment at somewhere around $1.8 billion. Yeah, and that's hundreds of jobs for Liberians, and there'll be other investments. Long term, we've heard talk about the Liberty Corridor. That opens up the prospects for that, and all that is simply a trade route, right? I mean, it's moving, again, goods, services, people along that trail, that railway line, and all of the benefits that stem from that as you get more companies. It's not about even just Ivanhoe, which is a significant investment. Don't get me wrong, 1.8 billion. This country desperately needs that. Or AML, which is another significant investment. But it's about all that will spring forward from that. So we haven't talked about it, but like I've gotten around during my year here. I've been to Maryland County, I've been to Nimba, I've been to Lofa, I've been to up in Voinjama, I've been to Bomi, I've been to Bong, I've been to Grand Bassa, where I was a Peace Corps volunteer. But what I really saw up country when I went to Lofa is, and it brought home to me, but also in Bong and other places, was small and medium enterprises. So there's two aspects to this, right? There's big companies that come in and invest in Liberia because Liberia has mineral wealth or whatever it has, lumber, logging, other sectors, fishing, whatever it has. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of growing an economy is small and medium enterprises. And what I was really struck by when I was up in Lofa was the lack of access to basic capital that these farmers or small businesses face when they're not in Monrovia or nearby Monrovia. So again, it's about extending the banking system so that they can get access to credit, so that they can grow their businesses. Because it happens on, if I can say, multiple levels. And by no means am I claiming to be an economist, but that's how it works when it really happens, when it really connects. You've got, at the same time, you've got big investments and all that entails in terms of jobs and training and investment and infrastructure. You've got at the same time that growing grassroots level. And if I may, sorry, I'm gushing too much about this, but I'm excited about this. This is what really,
I can sense that.
Yeah, because I really do see this as a viable way for Liberia to really cross the threshold and live up to its fullest potential. But the other thing we haven't talked about, just 2 weeks ago, there was a group, Bridge to Prosperity, that was here, and I was able to host them and then participate in some of their events. This was largely made up of Liberian diaspora from the United States who came over to have meetings at ministries and to talk to people like myself about investing here. And that's another area that has frankly not been fully taken advantage of with it, which is that there are a lot of Liberians who have, for many reasons, left Liberia, but now are living legally in the United States, who want to come back here and want to invest here. And how do we attract that? So that's another important element of that. And they can do a lot in the small and medium enterprise space.
Now, the deal has to go to the legislature. It has to be
Of
ratified
course,
by the
of
legislature.
course.
This is a very key
100,
point.
yes.
Legally, that needs to be
Yep.
done. But the criticism that I've heard about you is that you apparently knew you were going to retire. So, and also knew that President Barker had this meeting with President Trump, lobbied or pushed through for this deal to go through before the meeting, and it became a big issue. What would you say to that criticism?
I don't know if it's a criticism, if I'm honest. I mean, the fact that President Bush, it had nothing to do with my retirement, but sorry, I'll just disabuse you of that right away. But the fact that, they had the opportunity to close a major trade deal before going to Washington to, frankly, tell President Trump that we did this, that we are open for business, is not necessarily the worst signal to send. And again, talk to anybody involved in this negotiations. This has been in the works for many, many years. And so, the fact that they were able to get it over the finish line, and we, because this is a U.S. investment, we're able to get over the finish line. I'm celebrating it. Sorry. I think it's a good thing.
Is this also a move by President Trump to get closer to China, or maybe outpace China? Because at the moment, it does seem that China has outpaced the US in Africa, and it's had dominance in many African countries, including Liberia. Is this also a part of a counterattack, maybe, for lack of a better word?
Again, these are, I mean, you're right to mention China. I mean, China is a strategic competitor. Absolutely. And we're well aware that China sees Africa as well, the potential here, and is present here. That's frankly true for, diplomacy is there's two aspects to it, and part of that is trade. And that's a competition in many ways. So there's many countries out there competing for investment in Liberia. Turkey, I believe, is another one. India is another one. I'm probably failing to mention others. Again, I don't necessarily, nor do we as America, have any problem with that. But we need to be competitive in that space, right? I mean, it's to our advantage and it's to our mutual advantage. And what I would say is, and I would argue, is that we are the partner of choice for Liberia. Because of our long history, because of our shared history and our shared culture, cultural ties. We believe there's a natural affinity between our two countries, and so and we also believe we offer a strong package of opportunities as well. So that's part of my job, and just as it's part of the German or the EU ambassadors, whoever, it's part of their jobs to go out every day and advocate on behalf of U.S. investment in my case, but the other companies in their cases are national companies. So.
This is a special interview with retiring U.S. Ambassador to Liberia, Mark C. Turner. Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. My name is Anthony Stevens. Now, Ambassador Turner, you did serve as a Peacecore volunteer.
Yes.
in the 80s. Tell us about your experience. What is the legacy you're leaving behind, leaving Liberia?
That's a big question. I'll start with my experience as a Peace Corps volunteer, and I said this in my testimony before the U.S. Senate. I learned much more than I was able to teach when I was here as a volunteer, and what I mean by that is I worked with professionals in the health ministry out of the hospital, the central hospital in Buchanan, but we worked throughout the county, and it was a lot of long days and weeks where we would go up country, vaccinate. Bring supplies to clinics. We would go up 2-3 nights, sleep from village to village. What I saw during that time was the absolute commitment and dedication of Liberian public servants who, frankly, at that time, and oftentimes still, don't get paid on time, or go, they don't, their paychecks aren't like, I'm a public servant as well, but I know every month my paycheck's going to be arriving in my bank account. That's not always the case for public servants in Liberia. That wasn't the case then, but that never, my counterpart, Emerson Raley from Grand Bassa, who's a dear friend, and I got to see him again when I was back in last fall. He showed up every day for ready to work, and it was never a question for him that he wouldn't show up. So I learned a lot from that. It has totally guided me in my professional career. To see that commitment, that dedication, has been truly, it's left its mark on me. To have come back here for a year as the U.S. ambassador, especially during a transitional time in our leadership, right, from Biden to Trump, which has been, we'll say dramatic. I think it's in a good direction now, but it has not been easy. And as I just said previously, no transition has. But it's been a real honor. And I said this to the embassy staff when I announced my retirement the other day. I could not have hoped for a better team to lead. The professionalism, the empathy, and this goes for Liberians as well as American staff, that they've shown, and compassion that they've shown, and professionalism, if I've forgotten that they've shown towards each other has been awe-inspiring. I'll say it. I think we leave in a good place. Is everything perfect? No. Have we solved every problem here? Absolutely not. But I think we're in a good place to move forward and to move in a direction that I think is in Liberia's long-term interests. And let's not forget in the U.S.-Liberian relationships long-term interests.
So that's why you count as your legacy.
I do. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a public servant. It's just not an individual thing. I put that in a box long ago. I'm a U.S. diplomat, and I represent the United States of America. I'm also a U.S. diplomat with a strong connection to Liberia and someone who cares deeply about Liberia and its future, and that always infuses every decision I make and every action I take.
Talk to us about the people, Liberians.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about it. Great sense of humor. Resilient, obviously. You can't have lived through a decade-plus long civil war. But I even saw that when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, how they dealt with hardship, in a way that was just, again, just incredible. And just the friendliness. Again, as a Peace Corps volunteer, I lived next door to a family in Buchanan on the outskirts of the town, and became very close to them. And they looked after me, from lighting my coal pot in the morning to just every small thing. And that's what I remember. That's what I take away from it. I have to say, as ambassador, I get to get out and see people, but a hard adjustment is not being able to walk out my door in the morning and walk around Monrovia by myself and talk to people. That's partly the security aspect of the job, and I miss that. I'm not going to lie, but I have gotten it's given me the opportunity to, someone was asking me the other day. I've never felt more. This is an odd thing to say, but more like a diplomat. In my career, I've had a lot of great opportunities. I was a spokesperson for many years for the State Department, and that is a tremendous responsibility, but also a really cool opportunity as well to speak on behalf of the U.S. government. It was, again, I'm so grateful for that. But to be here, every day is different. You're dealing with internal problems, such as the closure of USAID, which is hard, and you have to make hard decisions. You have to make sure that the mission, the embassy here, that morale is good, that people are enjoying themselves here, that people have opportunity, or you're dealing with their problems. There's an internal component, like there is with any company or any business or any entity, and then there's the external component of it. Moving away from aid towards a trade relationship based on trade has not been easy. Cultivating and deepening my relationship with key ministries and key ministers, I think I've developed some good friendships there. I hope so. I hope they would say the same. But I've been largely really impressed by the cabinet that President Boakai has put in place. And I also have to say, I had a long conversation with President Boakai the other day before he went for Washington, just to talk to him about the visit and the expectations, and just to try to prep him and have a conversation. And he's got a real vision for this country, and I get that just when I'm talking to him one on one. He knows what the problems are, and he sees very clearly what needs to be done. And so, as much as the United States can be a partner to that end, I feel like, that's our priority here. If we can make Liberia a stronger, stabler, more prosperous partner in this region, then that's the best thing we can do.
The culture, yeah.
Oh, the culture, I forgot. I like the finger snap. I don't speak Bassa like I used to. I just know the greetings, but even those are rusty. I love Liberian English. I won't speak it here,
Which
but
Liberian word do you
oh gosh, I used to use so many, but wappy.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's a great one. Or coming to go, or I reach
Yeah, we
you.
come and go.
I reach you. All those things. It's a wonderful. Even before I knew I was coming back here, my kids, show them the snap of the finger. They thought that was the coolest thing. I don't know why that hasn't taken off in other cultures, because it's one of the coolest handshakes out there. I think. I feel like there should be a TikTok movement on that alone. But Liberians are just wonderful, graceful, gracious people, and I'll miss it. I'll miss the culture, the music. It's great. It's a wonderful place. It's got so much to offer, and that's another thing. I want something we haven't talked about, something the president cares deeply about, that will also come, that we haven't hit on, but tourism and getting Liberia.
Yes, it's part of this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Have I jumped ahead? I'm sorry. I keep doing that. But that's another component to what we're talking about, is how do you make it easier for not just Americans, but Europeans, others, to come to Liberia and discover what it offers, from, going to the Eco Lodge up in Yakepa, or going to Robertsport, or going to, wherever. How do you, Liberia to me is like a little bit like Costa Rica was back in the 1980s, and what it offers in terms of ecotourism, but you just need to build the infrastructure to get there. So when somebody arrives in Roberts Field, they can get to, Sapo National Park, or to Robertsport, or wherever they're going easily. So you need to build that infrastructure, but that's another, I think, exciting sector that could be developed, that really offers
How can
promising.
Liberia make this attractive?
I think, there's a lot. Again, a lot is infrastructure. You have to build a hospitality industry, and that relies on having good roads and having vehicles so when, a group of people get down from the plane in Roberts Field, they're taken to the Eco Lodge in Roberts Port, and they can spend the week there. And, that's how other countries have done it. You build that infrastructure, and then from there, you'll just see it grow. You'll see other startups, you'll see restaurants, you'll see it's kind of organic. But I've seen that happen in other countries where I've served, especially Senegal. Senegal's done a really good job of developing that tourism. Mostly it was connected to France, given its history. But Ghana's also done that extremely well.
Even the Gambia has done well.
Gambia has done well as well. Yeah, so absolutely, Liberia can be a part of that.
Liberia does have a
And
tourism authority now.
they do.
How can that be a game changer for the country?
Well, I think they just need to be well resourced. That's part of it. And that's the fate of a lot of ministries, is great ideas but not resourced enough. So that's a component of it. But again, you have to build that sector, the economy. You have to, again, encourage small businesses, to guides, tour guides, whatever. You have to regulate that industry. It's all part of, and I think they're moving in that direction. It's not something you just flip a switch. Again, let's not remember where this country is coming from. It's been 25 years, but it's coming out of a devastating civil war. So you're still seeing the effects of that to this day. But, I think this country holds great promise. And going back to where we were with diaspora, given the links between our two countries, I can see this becoming a key destination for Americans as well, especially African Americans.
Let's talk now about the government more. You did say earlier on that the country did have democratic transitions, the stability, of course. What would you say about the government's performance in the area of fight against corruption?
Um, what I say about that is I do believe that Liberia has all the right mechanisms in terms of auditing agencies, or mechanisms in terms of the LAC, which does good work. And in terms of the Ministry of Justice, they just need to resource them properly and be able to carry through with prosecutions. So, what I've seen here, and it's not unusual, but, a lack of resources or lack of, lack of resources mostly. But, the auditing, what is it, the
The
General
General Auditing
Auditing
Commission.
Commission, thank you. Very well run, by the way. The leadership there is great, but does good work. But it goes to the executive mansion and nothing happens to it. You've got to build, so you've got the right mechanism, or the lack, for example, puts forward something to the Ministry of Justice, but the case isn't prosecuted. You've got to put all the pieces together. Everybody I've met who's in charge of those organizations are good. They get what they're supposed to do, but it's trying to empower them and resource them
So in
properly.
other words, the government should fast track prosecution.
Yes, yes, I think that's part of it. At the end of the day, any government is going to only be um, it's going to be held accountable by who is able to prosecute against. Yes.
Now, the RDCC is pushing to have a special court for corruption. A bill is currently before the legislature. The Office for War and Economic Crimes Court for Liberia is also pushing to have a special court for corruption. This, somebody would say, speaks to the level of the prevalence of this issue in the country.
Corruption here is both of us and everybody listening to this knows corruption's a problem. And I'm not trying to be glib in any way when I say that. I mean, it's what I spoke about in my testimony before the Senate. It's what I saw here when I was a volunteer back in the 80s. And I'm talking about the small levels of corruption to people who a little dash here and a little like whatever small money, which is another good Liberian expression. But to frankly corruption within the political circles and by public officials. Part of that's growing a culture, and what I mean by that is a culture that is where you can have somebody come into public office that uses that role to better the country and maybe takes a salary cut to do so, or maybe just gets by and but relies on their government salary and doesn't seek kickbacks or doesn't seek payoffs. Um, you know, that's a key part of it. But you have to have mechanisms that hold those people accountable, and that's what I think you're seeing. We've talked a lot about this internally with other, what I would say, like-minded embassies who work on this issue with us, and also within the government itself. I think everything you've talked about or mentioned is out there. Special courts are one way to attack this. I think there's also courts that get backlogged, and so you can look at the court system. I'm not an expert on any of this, so I don't want to speak to something outside my area of expertise. I just know what I picked up from my conversations with the Minister of Justice, with the Chief Justice before she retired, and with the chairman of the LACC, and that there are areas of weakness within the justice system or the court system rather, that need to be strengthened. So that's part of the hard work that needs to be done.
What would you say about judicial independence? Do you think the judiciary is fully independent?
Again, I don't want to speak outside my area of expertise. I would leave that for the Minister of Justice and others to speak to. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
And talking about weaknesses in the judiciary that you mentioned.
When you say that, you're talking about judges or others who are susceptible to being bought off or anything. That's true anywhere. And that's something, again, the only way you fight against that is by building systems of accountability into by building accountability into the system. For everything I mentioned here, I'm sure you could cite a case in the United States where there's been a corrupt judge or a corrupt official doing this. The important thing is shining a light on that corruption and holding them accountable for that corruption.
Let's talk now about the Office for War and Economic Crimes Court. You had a visit quite recently there. You paid a visit there. What is your...
I need to go back.
Yes, maybe before you leave, but what do you think about how they've performed so far?
I think, look, I'll be perfectly frank. They're not well resourced. They don't have enough funds, to put on to set up rather a war crimes court. Frankly, it's expensive. We've been trying to encourage them to look at less expensive models because I don't think the donor money is there anymore.
Less expensive models such as?
I'm trying to think of Sierra Leone is not a less expensive model. I think the Gambia was. There's other models. We've had, we've done a lot with them in terms of technical assistance. We brought groups here from the Gambia, from Rwanda, which has some experience in this field, obviously. And we've also brought some of our experts who've done war crimes in Yugoslavia and elsewhere. Steve Rapp comes to mind, who's a very well-known lawyer. And we're looking at ways we continue that assistance. But they need funding. They need to pay their staff. They need the operational expenses. They need the budget. And too often, and I understand this is a government administration that's trying to pay bills and trying to find its way in terms of its budget, and it's taken a budget hit, and we're not largely, we're somewhat responsible for that with the ending of U.S. assistance and where that was going within the budget. So they've had to make up some shortfalls, absolutely. But at some point, you need to decide whether the WEC is a priority, and if it is, fund it as such. And then from there, you can start really putting the pieces together. I think Barbu has done a good job setting them up. I know the UN has sent some technical expertise. When I was there was a person there. So they've got the elements in place. They just need, and they've got I believe, an action plan in place that they've submitted.
Just a roadmap.
Roadmap. Thank you so much. I get these confused, but a roadmap. Thank you. Roadmap in place. So now you just need to resource it. And again, that's a conversation they can have with us. It's a conversation they can have with the UN. I would just say it needs to be, if I could put it so callously, on a budget, because I don't think the money's there anymore, not just from the United States, but from other major donors.
I will get to that in a minute, but
Okay.
President Barker did order that the office should receive $2 million annually.
Yes.
Babu has complained that he's yet to receive a dime, dating back to even last year, where he was supposed to receive over $300,000.
Yeah.
What does that say about the government's commitment to this area, which I've heard from you now saying is very critical for Liberia's long-term development and prosperity?
So I'll preface it by saying a note of appreciation for what President Bowenkai did the last couple of weeks in terms of reconciliation. And as someone who lived here, as a Peace Corps volunteer, as an American, but who lived here under Samuel Kenyon Doe and his presidency, I struggled with a little bit, to be honest. I was here. I went through the military checkpoints. I lived through several coup attempts. I know what he did when he came to power. I thought it took a tremendous courage to do what President Boakai attempted to do in closing those chapters. And I think it was necessary. And I told him this face to face when I met with him last week. It took me a while to see what he was doing, and then I appreciated it, which is at a certain point you need to reconcile. You need to forgive, and you need to move on. And I think he did a very good job at that. So I'll stop. That's one aspect, which is part of this. It's not closing the door on what happened, and we can get into this, and I can talk probably too long about this, but the other aspect is war crimes and economic crimes, but war crimes. Some of the major perpetrators, if I could say it that way, of those have passed on, but others are still around. And there are so many affected by that war. I'm always struck by how much of a presence it has, but how little it's discussed. What do I mean by that? I don't know if the younger generation know what their parents went through during those 13 years. I mean, the trauma that so many Liberians went through, whether they fled to Ghana, spent years in refugee camps in Ghana, then somehow made it to the United States, or whether they stayed here and suffered through here. And I mean also the child soldiers who lost their education years. I mean, and were left, by the wayside after all of this, without an education, without a skill set other than being soldiers. The trauma is massive, and we can't underestimate this. I say this all the time when I talk to my leadership back in Washington. It has generational effects here and elsewhere, and I think we can never underestimate the lasting effect of that trauma.
Therefore, the quote is important.
Okay.
You think?
Yeah. And I think what is important here is that a war and economics crime court can help in some ways close the door to that. Not completely, but in some ways bring a finality to that. How so? It can hold people accountable. It doesn't have to be everybody. but it has to hold some people accountable. Um, and by doing that, you send a signal that there is an impunity here, that there is rule of law here in Liberia, and that goes for crimes committed today, crimes committed last week, and crimes committed 20, 30 years ago.
Back to my question about the
Okay.
funding issue.
Funding issue. Sorry, you're a good reporter. The funding issue is, I've heard the same complaints, and I recognize that's a problem. I mean, you cannot have a priority that is underfunded or not funded, right? I mean, so at some point, whether the president or his cabinet has to decide if they're going to fund this, and then decide to do so and do it. It's just a matter of everybody lives on a budget, whether it's in your house or at your job or whatever. And when you look at that budget, you've got a finite resources, and you're like, okay, when we're looking at this, we can't do everything, but we can do this. And I would say that President Boakai has been very clear about the war and economics crime being a priority. So that's your answer. Got to make it a priority.
Okay, so now I want to go back to another point you were making when you were talking about officials, budget, and all of that. Liberian officials public officials are are amongst the highest paid in the world. There's been this concern by advocates for the code. They've been saying, well, cut down salaries, use some of that money to fund the code. What is your view on that?
I'm not going to wade into these kinds of, frankly, healthy discussions that are taking place between different political entities here. You know, I walk a line here. I don't take my position lightly, but I also don't see it as my place to necessarily wade into some of the political discourse that takes place that is natural in any democracy. It's where I go back to, is there, when I say that Liberia has built an enviable track record in terms of democratic governance, and during the election and the campaigns, we kept very close contact with to make sure that it was peaceful, that violence was, and we still keep an eye on that so that we can, if necessary, use our voice or our clout or whatever you want to call it to step in and say X, Y, or Z about this situation. But largely, my own attitude as a diplomat is to let these political processes play out. That is how a country's political or rather a country matures as a democracy, by having these debates internally. You don't need big brother or big sister leaning over your shoulder saying, oh, you should do it this way. That's not my role here. That's not what I would consider my role here.
So for clarity, no funding for the code is coming from the US for now.
Not right now. We're looking at, we have provided considerable technical assistance. We're looking at ways we can continue to provide that technical assistance, but no funding, no.
This may not be well received though, amongst the advocates.
They're aware. They're aware. Again, largely we're trying to, help them, build up the structure and the processes. Again, this predates the Trump administration. When I was coming on board and I was getting briefed up about the War and Economic Crimes Court, and it's had a long history, right? I mean, didn't begin with Boakai, it began with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And what we've always said about it is it must be Liberian owned and Liberian run. And so, again, it's not about, and this brings us back a little bit to the assistance debate. It's not about doing things here for Liberians. It's about building the capacity for Liberia to do things on its own. And so part of that can be done through technical assistance. I mean, and that's what we're trying to do.
What kind of technical assistance will the US give this process?
What we've done so far is in the previous administration, we had our special envoy for global criminal justice come over, made several visits and work with them. She has a wealth of experience. We've had, I think, 2 to 3 technical teams come over, and these are people with experience on other war crimes courts or technical assistance or technical experience rather, doing this back in the U.S. And they've come and just spent a week here or 2 weeks here with the war crimes court, with civil society, which has a huge component. You'll remember that there was initially somebody chosen who wasn't vetted through civil society. President Boakai made the decision to reopen the selection and do it in a fair and transparent way. We encouraged him to do that, but that was his decision to make. So, these are the kind of things that we're trying to help with, but it's technical assistance in that regard.
Now, the office is projecting the War Crimes Code office that the Economic Crimes Code or the Special Anti-Corruption Code will be established in November of 2026, and the War and Economic Crimes Code will be established exactly a year after that. What do you think about these two dates? Short periods, or you think it's too far?
It's, I mean, it's aspirational. I need to frankly understand better about what the Economic Crimes Court mandate will be. I'm not 100% clear on that.
The anti-corruption code would try cases or year cases from 1979 to present.
To present, okay,
Yeah,
so okay, so up until now.
the war in
Whereas
economic
the
crimes code from
whereas the
1979
War
to
Crime Court
2003.
will be focused on during the war.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's not my place necessarily to comment on how they've fleshed this out. It's a plan, and it's important to have a plan. Um, it's ambitious, but that's okay. It's okay to be ambitious. Again, none of this can happen without the War and Economics Crime Court, the WEC, being properly resourced.
Now, before we leave you in this interview, I want us to go back on the point of democracy. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, the democracy is maturing. Is there a state or in a position where you think now that the country can't slip back to those ugly years?
Well, I think Liberia gets that, honestly. What I've seen over the past year here, what I've traveled about, when I've spoken with people, there's always that, for this political leadership of this generation, they understand that. I mean, they watch this closely. I mean, many of them lived through that, as we just said, and so they bear the scars of that, both good and bad. And I think that, you know, um, again, what this country has been able to accomplish since 2003 is genuinely um, remarkable. And again, speaks to the knowledge that you can never go back to those times. Um, uh, but any democracy, and I would say this for the United States, is only as strong as its processes and its institutional strength. And what do I mean by that? Is you need a strong court system, you need a strong corruption, accountability mechanisms. You need a good, strong legislature. You need you need.
Let's talk about the legislature a little bit. What do you think about them?
Without discussing the what happened with the whole change of leadership and speakership, um, uh, I will say this about the new speaker. He invited the diplomatic corps to the Capitol, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've had a subsequent meeting with him. I found him to be very open-minded and very transparent and very willing listener and also engaging. He's willing to engage. That's the first step, right? I mean, as long as you have a legislature that's willing to talk to you and both with their concerns, but also hear your concerns, that is the first part of
The
diplomacy.
criticism from advocates and from ordinary citizens is that they always peddle their own interests.
Yeah, that's part of politics. I mean, I'm not being crass or anything. I'm just saying, part of politics is transactional. It's looking after your constituents, and any good politician is going to put his or her constituents over the broader interests. That's partly,
No, their personal interests above their
Oh, oh, well,
constituents.
that's inexcusable. I mean, that's, that don't get into politics if you're just looking, and I'm not speaking to any, I'm just saying on the issue itself, on the idea that you should put, no, 100%. When you go into politics, that is a public role, and you are doing that because you want to better your constituents. And that's, no, sorry, thank you for clarifying that. But again, back to the larger point, so that's something you've got to always kind of refresh and look at is how do you make Liberia's democratic institutions stronger? I would say the Electoral Commission has proven its worth, frankly, through all the elections and the fact that they've run them no violence, no, all of them have been free, fair, and credible. That's a remarkable achievement. So there are good institutions in place. We need to continue to strengthen those. That's part of building good governance, and that's something we'll continue to look at and help with.
An independent press is
Independent
key
press, it is key.
to any democracy.
It is key.
What would you say about the media in Liberia? You've had many interactions.
Absolutely, and and professionally. So it's funny. Before I came into the Foreign Service, I was actually studying at a journalism school in Berkeley, California, and And then as I said, I spent many years as a press attaché and in the press side of things, if I could put it that way, and then as a spokesperson. So I've dealt a lot with the media in my career, a lot. At the end of the day, what I want to see in any country, any community, any city is a robust, vibrant press. I think Liberia has that. I think the economic realities of the media these days cannot be ignored or overlooked. I think a lot of media outlets in the United States and elsewhere are also struggling with the same. How do you build a viable business model where you're not, frankly, taking bribes or whatever? I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying but you're running a clean ship, but through advertising and all that stuff and subscriptions, it's been tough. And that's not just true for Liberia. That's true for the United States and everywhere else. With the internet now, with information being considered free, how does a media outlet make money? It's hard. So I think at the same time, you're looking at a country like Liberia that is developing its media. At the same time, where globally that space, the media space, is being redefined by social media and the internet and TikTok and Instagram and all those things and all those different aspects. It's a time of tremendous change. So what do I mean? So I think what do you do during something like that? You've got to adhere to a level of professionalism. You've got to have standards, high standards, and you've got to be incorruptible or not non-corruptible. You've got to be above board. It's especially key for independent media. They can't have any kind of air of that they're corruptible, and so that's what I would advise. Liberia's media outlets to stay professional, stay objective, and just report the facts and do the hard work, and you will build your credibility, and through that you'll build your audience.
Finally, this question has just come up. One of the policies of the government of the Trump administration is the new thorough screening process for visa applicants. When there was an announcement from the embassy, from the U.S. embassy here about that, there were mixed views in the public about that. Can you clarify why that is important? Can you clarify, please, to the audience what the new visa screening policy is important?
Yeah, I can, and I'm amazed we've talked now for it feels like a long time, and we didn't even bring up a visa policy, and so just the facts. It has nothing to do with our relationship with Liberia, our strong history with Liberia, and frankly, a little bit of sense of entitlement on the part of Liberians that they feel they belong to the United States, that they should be kind of co-citizens or have citizenship in the United States. They don't. We are two separate sovereign nations with a strong shared history. But when a Liberian goes to the United States, it has to be legally. And frankly, how we do things like visa reciprocity, and non-immigrant and immigrant visas, but largely non-immigrant, aka tourist, but also exchange and student visas. A lot of it is done just by statistics, and Liberia remains heavily on the wrong side of that statistics, meaning they have a very high overstay rate. I actually brought it, so I had that. Yeah, it's tourist, a 20% overstay rate, 11th highest in the world, and student and exchange visas 25%, which is 23rd in the world. They need to get on the other side. Other countries have done that, so it's not unachievable. But how you turn that around, we talked a lot about that. You build an economy here, but also a lot of what we've been working with the Liberian government on, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and others, the Ministry of Justice, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs especially, is public information. If you get a visa to the United States, when you walk past the customs and he'll stamp a date, you have to leave by that date. When you don't, you become illegally in the United States. That's not good for you, but it also affects the next Liberian who's going to that visa window trying to apply for a tourist visa, because it's like, oh, look at the rate just went up again, or it just doesn't help bring that rate down. Other countries have turned the corner. They've largely done that by becoming economically prosperous. That's what Ireland did. That's what Poland's done. That's what other countries in Africa have done, and they've been able to bridge that gap.
Is there any other thing that we haven't talked about in this interview that you want to comment on?
Well, Wow, that's a heck of a farewell question. No, again, I want to go back to the fact that, you can't be in this game as long as I've been and not be optimistic. And I'm a glass half full kind of person. I believe in Liberia. I wouldn't have come back here at all if I hadn't believed in Liberia. The reasons I'm leaving here are purely personal. Have to do with my own personal choices to be back with my family who have not been able to join me here. But I'm a strong believer in Liberia, in the people, in the culture, in the country itself. I think Liberia can succeed, and I always believe in that. And I think I'll leave it with this. As one door closes, another door opens. What do I mean by that? As one door closes with the end of assistance, another door opens in aid and investment. I have long held that the only way Liberia was never going to get to where it needs to go through assistance alone. It's helpful, but it's a Band-Aid. And I'm not trying to undermine or speak ill of USAIDs, far from it. They've done tremendous work here. But the only way you're really going to grow this place, get it to where it needs to be, is by growing the economy. The only way you're going to do that is with investment. So that's where I'm at.
Are you going to come back
I
after
hope
your
so.
retirement?
I hope so. I said in my email to I'll drag my wife and perhaps some of my kids back we'll ride in a KK car and go down the waterside.
You've ridden KK before.
I barely. Again, I'm not really allowed. I ride around town in a big armored vehicle. That's one of the downsides to this gig. But I remember that, and I love that part of Liberia. I love, I used to ride in a money bus, for 6 hours, crammed in the back, with the slogan on the back: "The downfall of a man is not the end of his life."
Nice.
Yeah, so all that stuff it's near and dear to me. So yes, I very much want to come back.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ambassador.
Thank you. A very good interview, by the way. Very comprehensive. I'm tired. But when I'm tired after an interview, you've done a good job. Thank you.
you.
Yeah, thanks,
I
man.
appreciate
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
the compliment.